Thank you so much, Patty, for joining us today on the We Don't Play podcast show. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. I'm really happy to be here. I love the vibe of your podcast. I've been listening to the shows, and it's just real chill, and I love that whole vibe that you have going. So thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Anytime. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Just to ask you off the bat, what favorite episode do you like on the podcast so far?
Well, there's a guy that you had about financial freedom. So that's something that my highest value is freedom. So I'm always looking for things. That's something that perked my ears. I was like, oh, I want to hear, and just the stories of the entrepreneurs. You had one, and the reason why I reached out to you, you had one young girl, maybe 13, 15, 16, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
She blew me away with, I think it was with Pinterest or something. I was blown away with her episode too. I was like, wow, this is amazing how in this day and age, it truly is your own economy. People can start a business wherever they want and whatever they want. And so a lot of the guests that you've had really show up in that way. So I really appreciate the sentiment, because I'm such an advocate for being an entrepreneur, seeing yourself in the way that you can build a business the way you want, create your own economy regardless of what's going on in the external world. So.
That is true. I appreciate that. Yes, definitely. Those are the people who, bring it to the forefront. And when you hear their stories and you think about what you're doing with your own business, it kind of like lights a spark in you. You start to do things differently because you're like, oh, if this person could do it, how old is this person? Why can't I do it the same way?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So
that's exactly right. It shows you what's possible. Absolutely.
Exactly. Wow. I'm so thrilled that you're here, and I would love people to know more about you, Patty. And who are you? What have you been doing? What have you been working on? And how did you get to this point where being the founder of Positioning to Profit, how did this all come along?
Thanks, Trevor. So I'm Patty Dominguez. For those of you that are listening, I'm a positioning expert, and it wasn't always that way. I grew up in a very blue-collar family, and I was always taught the biggest dream my parents had for me was for me to go to college to get a job. And so for my dad, he said, I want you to have a door, meaning an office. He's like, I want you to have a door, and I want you to have a nice car, and I want you to have a cell phone, right? And so he was a carpenter his whole life, and so that was his big dream. And then that's when I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go to school. I'm gonna do the things. And what I realized is the higher the ladder I went, the more miserable I became, and I just wasn't satisfied. And well, sometimes things drastically have to happen for things to switch up in your life,
Yeah.
And back in 2008, I was laid off because the economy, right, it crashed in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
So I was laid off, and I picked up Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad, and that changed my life because I really recognized that my entire life I had been operating from a trading time for money perspective, and there was a huge clarity that came to me as a result of that. It's like, oh, you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to create a business system for yourself. But the reality is, even if I had an MBA and I understood the concepts of having a business, I never saw it for myself. I know that sounds almost ridiculous, but you are a product of your environment and your upbringing and all the things, And again, I grew up very inner city, very blue collar, very, very simple in the way of like, it's enough to get a good job. So anyway, I started down this whole process of like, okay, how do I become an entrepreneur? And so January 9th of 2013, so it's been exactly 10 years, literally from the day of this recording, basically, that I quit my job. And I thought that my corporate experience would be enough, but I also didn't realize just how different entrepreneurship is. And the reason I'm saying that is because just saying, oh, I have this degree or doing this kind of thing, it's not enough, And so I put myself out there and I said, okay, I'm going to do some consulting. I'm going to do marketing consulting. Now that phrase is so generalized that it wasn't standing out, because think about it. If you just say I'm a consultant, what does that mean, right? A consultant for what? It's too macro level. And so what I recognized in that timeline of becoming an early entrepreneur, I recognized a couple of things. It was the mindset that I needed to figure myself out in the way that being an entrepreneur, I had a very, very pivotal moment where I was freaking out about money, because having been an employee for so long, I recognized that regardless of what was going on, every 2 weeks I was getting my paycheck. So I could be super productive, or I didn't have to be as productive, because it didn't matter. I always got my paycheck every 2 weeks. In entrepreneurship, you have to create your own results. And an early mentor of mine said, why are you freaking out? Entrepreneurs create new money whenever they want. And I was like, what? That was like a huge moment for me, because I recognized, I'm like, it's up to me. You know, it's up to me. I have no limits. There is no cap. There is no ceiling. It's up to me. And then, so that was the first part, is the internal wiring around money and deserving and all these other things. And then the other side of it is like, how do I stand out in a crowded market? Because just talking about your schooling and your certifications, that's not enough. That doesn't stand out. But if you pinpoint and you target in and you zone in on finding a white space, what I call white space, if you position yourself so that you're differentiated, that's when things start changing. And that's when, to me, the big epiphany I had was I was doing a consulting gig with a company, and I was on this call, and it was like brand team, the advertising agency, all these people were on a Zoom calls. A bunch of people were talking about this new product introduction. And the product was a cookie. It's like that chocolate chip cookie. That's why I have that here in the video. And it was like the big moment. I was like, holy crap, like, I can't believe that all these people are on this call to talk about a cookie, and entrepreneurs, we're not talking about positioning. So that's when I knew, I'm like, I'm going to be talking about positioning. So what I do is I help women in business, so service-based entrepreneurs, establish their category of one. What it means is like we all come in and have our own unique abilities that we're not highlighting enough. And so that's where I'm really passionate about bringing that zone of genius and talented people, so they have a message to share, because their message matters. So that's what I do.
That is beautiful. I'm happy that you're doing this for the community, because a lot of people like you need to be out there to let other people know that they're not alone, especially in entrepreneurship, right, where we feel like, man, nobody's listening. There are crickets everywhere. If everything is going well, yay. If everything is going bad, nay. So there's always this balancing factor that comes in for entrepreneurs, which sometimes we don't really get to see until something happens. But when you are having that accountability partner and that person that is pushing you on and cheering you on, then you can feel like I'm not the only person in the room trying to get a mission or a statement done. So it's really important to look at it that way. And you mentioned something very important about branding and positioning. Now, someone who is building their brand may hear those terms every day, but they don't really know the difference between a brand and the positioning of a brand. So could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's a very important question, because the fact is, when people go off on their own, they're really focusing on their website and their logo, and what kind of logo am I going to get, and what are my colors on my website, and all that stuff. And I laugh, because I'm like, oh my God, that's the wrong place to start. And the reason I say that is because, and I use this as a visual so that people see how important this is. So if I were to say to you, you can build your dream house, there is no budget, the sky's the limit, what kind of house do you want, right? And so then you tell me, I want, a castle, or I want super modern, or whatever it may be. So the place to start to build that dream house is where? It's in constructing the blueprints, right? So you need to hire an architect for the blueprints, because the blueprints is going to establish the foundation of how your beautiful, perfect dream house is going to live, like where it's going to be and how it's going to be built, so that the foundation is rock solid. That is what positioning means. Positioning is the strategy. It's the message, your market, your offers. It's the foundation, right? So that once you have that, then you can go into branding. The branding is the visual interpretation of the positioning. So branding is the equivalent of, now that you're in your dream house, you can talk about the paint colors, the curtain colors, how your granite counters are going to look, or what kind of counters you want. That's branding, the visual side of it. So where most people fall short is they skip positioning altogether, which is why when you're going out there and you're promoting your business, random acts of marketing happen, because you're just throwing stuff at the wall and hoping something sticks, and then you're wondering why think like, wow, it's lonely, I'm not getting results, nobody's listening to me. Why? Because you don't have a tight focus on who is it that you want to serve and what problems are you solving for, and are you saying the message in a way that connects with them, so much so that they say, oh my God, it's like you're in my head, like you so get me, right? And so that's the difference, is creating this foundation first. No different than if you were building a dream home, then you focus on all the other stuff like branding and where you should be and what platform to be on and all that stuff. But people don't do it in that order.
Right. People go and get the colors and the beautiful symbols, and they're like, hey, I have a brand, and then they forget to even trademark it. Like there's so many layers on that. So when people are creating brands, there's this thing about psychology of branding, or color psychology. How important is it for brands to consider their colors when they're choosing the niche that they're picking? Because sometimes when you hear the word niche, it's like, okay, it's this small circle, but there's more to the circle. There's more value to the circle. So how do you validate the color based on the psychology of the brand you're trying to create for your marketing plan?
Yeah, that's a good question. I will say, though, I'm not a graphic designer. I'm not an artist either, so I want to be really fair with that. But what I can say is that I think an easy thing to do is colors, they evoke emotion, right? And so if you think about the financial industry or the banking industry, they do the grays and the blues and that kind of thing, right? So, or if you have a young teen brand, they're usually pinky and like kind of yellow and pops and all that stuff. So colors evoke emotion, and I think an opportunity is for you to say, when everybody's zigging, you want to zag. So if there are people, so even in your podcast art, okay? So your podcast art, if you were to take the podcasts that are popular in your category and you put the thumbnails of the podcast on a page, and if you put your podcast artwork in that mix, is it popping? Right, so that's why you want to pop, like where the eye is going. Typically, if you have a red, your eye will go to that. If you have yellow, your eye will go to that. And so there's a reason when you are putting together your color scheme, what emotion is it evoking in it, and is that emotion in alignment with the emotion that you want to project, right? So if you have like lime green and neon pop, and you're like, and then okay, that's a really specific vibe, but then your vibe is like cool and just chill, like it doesn't go together, right? So you really want to be in alignment with the emotions that you want to evoke, and to make sure that it's representative of the sentiment of the experience. So I would go about it that way at a really macro level, is just taking a look first as like the emotions you want to evoke, and then also doing the comparison in terms of where your competition is. If everyone's going with blues and grays, no, don't play it safe and be more of the same. Is ask yourself a question like, how can I pop? Like, how can I stand out? How can I differentiate? Because at the end of the day, we want to differentiate wherever possible. And that means with the colors on your website or the look of your website, because there's a lot of different tools that are out there that say, oh, we'll give you a template. And so I see a lot of different types of coaches and solopreneurs, their websites all look basically the same because they've bought a template. And so you're templatizing your branding instead of really figuring out what is it that makes you different, right? Just putting more depth into the way that you want to show up, I think, is really essential, and you shouldn't gloss over that either.
That's a great point to mention there, templatizing your brand. I haven't heard that before, because people use that and say my brand is great, and everybody's copying each other's marketing plan because we're in this red ocean instead of building your own deep blue ocean strategy.
Yeah, I that's exactly it. You've nailed it. The problem with Me Too, or the copycat, I should say, not Me Too because it has a different reference, but the problem with copycat marketing is that people will look at the one big whale or the couple big whales in the market, and they'll be like, oh, okay, well, if I'm exactly like that, then I'll be popular. And the fact is, no, you're not. You're only ever going to be a second-rate version of that person. instead of just picking and staying in your own lane and say, well, what's representative of how you want to show up? Because that's the thing. And I know before we hit the go live button, we were talking about how things are changing and it's really fast paced, and you have AI and you have all these cool tools. And so they can become threats in the market, like competitive threats, or saying everything's templatized to keep it easy. But what's never going to go out of style is that there's only one of you, right? There's only one of you, and there's only the sentiment and the philosophies and your core values and the way that you show up and your reason for being. And so the thing that I think is so dynamic about creating a personal brand is that you want to highlight, I know that sounds almost cliche, the authenticity of who you are. And I recognize that for me personally, I'm never going to I shouldn't say never, but I'm not going to compete with the big brands, right? Like the big people, the big coaches in my space. What I can do though is show up as me, and so what is really, and this may get a little woo, but what you can't dispute is resonance, right? The resonance. When you resonate with someone and that person tells you, I don't know why, but I really want to work with you. Why? It's because you resonate with them, with what you're talking about and your vibe and your reason for being and your sharing. That person is going to connect with you. Why? Because it's you. Because at the end of the day, if we were to look at how to show up with your marketing, you can find all the answers you want on YouTube. I mean, let's face it.
Right.
But the way that you differentiate is by projecting more of the thing that makes you you, that is different, that nobody else can dispute, that nobody else can challenge you from your experiences. Then that's going to attract people, because they're like, dang, I mean, she really knows what she's talking about, and I really connect with her message. And that's what you want more of. That's really critical.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. You know, as you were mentioning this, I was like, you know what would be really nice to see if we can put a case in point, and maybe you could give us an example of one of your clients in the recent past that you've worked with, that you took through that journey and you highlighted some of their weaknesses and their strengths to see how the best outcome for their business could be. Is there any in mind you can think of?
Yeah, I would say that a recent client of mine that is she's so awesome. She came from corporate, she's in Japan, and I really admire her so much because she left a very successful career and she wants to reinvent herself, and she's really passionate. I believe that mastery is so overlooked, meaning I respect so much when people have that like OG, like I put in the time and the expertise to learn this thing. Like I have so much respect for that. So she studied in Japan under a master key expert, and basically it's about life force, energy, and breathing, and there's just this new way of breathing that infuses your cells with more energy. I'm totally not explaining it in the way that it should be. I'm not giving it its due justice, but what I want to convey is that she wanted to share this gift because it gives longevity to life. It heals people's, anxiety and worry and all these things. I'm like, and she's so passionate about it, right? So she came to me and she was like, listen, I've taken all these courses and I've done all these things and I'm just not connecting with people. And then I said, okay, well, tell me about what you do. And so she can back up what she can do. So that's the first thing, is that if you're putting yourself out there, you want to make sure, right, to be in integrity and say, yes, I can back up what I'm talking about. So we wanted to find her differentiation. We wanted to find the white space, right? You called it the bloody ocean. So much competition out there. And so it's finding the white space. I call it white space, or the blue ocean, how you refer to it. And so I said, okay, so tell me more. What do you do? And so it's really finding out. And so what I found out through a conversation with her, she's 60. Okay, she just turned 60. And she has never gone through a woman's change of life, like when your hormones change, like, and they're going through like menopause and stuff like that. I was like, wait a minute, what did you just say? She's like, I don't know what that's like. I'm like, are you kidding me? Here's the reason. Before that moment, okay, she was talking about her breathing technique and stuff like that, and people would show up and they would be like, oh, this is so great, Miyako, thank you for sharing, thank you. And then they would leave and they wouldn't buy her thing. And the reason is this, because their pain wasn't great enough. So ask yourself this question: if your offer, if that thing that you are doing is not solving for a problem, and even better, an urgent problem, then your offer or your product is just a nice to have. And that's the worst place to be. Because if it's not a priority, if it's not solving for a problem, if it's not healing, and people are like, man, I really got this problem that I want to solve for. If you can't get somebody at that state, your product and service is probably not going to sell. Okay, and then you're going to struggle. Now, when we found out after having that conversation, I'm like, wait a minute, what'd you say? You've never had a half? She's like, oh no, we don't have that in Japan. And I was like, oh my God, this is exactly your angle. This is your angle. So when she found her niche, when she found the message, because women around after the age of 45 or so, they start having these changes, hormonal changes, or maybe a woman that has gone through a hysterectomy or any of these things, they are struggling. They can't sleep, they have headaches, they are crabby, they have all of these sweats and this and that, and all of the things that she teaches heals that. So now the conversation is different, because she was helping somebody with an urgent problem. Everything shifted in her business, right? So that's what we want to get to. And what's so cool and what I admire about her is at the age of 60, she started her YouTube channel, and she's talking about it on TikTok, and she's putting herself out there. So that's why your positioning has to be first, so that you have a message that's clear and resonates and solves for a problem. Then you craft the offers that make sense. Now you can go and activate and show up on socials and do all the things, so that people can find you with that thing that you could sell for. And that's how, in her case, and I love her example, because she's an older woman, and it's like, it's never too late. It's never too late to start a business or to share your passion. And I think it's absolutely possible when you have these foundational principles in place.
I'm so happy that I decided to ask you this question, because it wasn't even part of the questions I wanted to ask. But when you mentioned something like that, I said, let's see what this takes us to. Because one thing that came to mind was somebody who is at that age, who is thriving. That means a 12-year-old, a 17-year-old, a 25-year-old should be like, what am I doing with my life? It's like a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call, because it also shows that you have time to do these things, but because of imposter syndrome, because of peer pressure, and all these things, we're weighed down, and we don't really have that light or beacon of light to show others that this is what I can do. Whether you like it or not, this is what's making my money, and this is what's putting food on the table. But some people don't get to that point where they feel like they want to be liberated by that, idea.
Yeah, that's a really, really important point that you made, because for me personally, so I have this whole thing, right? So I learned all these positioning things when I was in my corporate job for a really long time, and you can put that together. But then what I really found out is I was working with people, and then really recognized that exactly what you said. They would go through the imposter syndrome, who am I, and I don't know if I'm an expert, and this, that. Well, how much longer do you think? How many more hours do you think it's going to take for you to really realize that you are an expert? And so what I recognize, and this is really the genesis of the framework that I teach, is that it starts with internal positioning. And internal positioning is all about, it's really discovering that your business results will always match your identity every time, no matter what. Right? Have you ever recognized that there's people that could take the same course, the same group coaching, the same program? Somebody does nothing with it, the other person can make multiple millions. Why is that? It's the same course. So it's not the course, it's not that, it's the way, it's your identity, it's the internal workings. And so I have a program within my program, is called Meet My Higher Self, and it's about recognizing the multifaceted approach around discovering how you have to be in alignment with your internal positioning. It is like really seeing yourself as the expert, because if you don't, nobody else will, right? So I always say, I'm like, you can't wait for anyone to anoint you the expert. And I talk about it, I call it the triad of her success, and it's like the self-love, because I know that may sound hokey to people, but if you have imposter syndrome, that's a lack of self-love, right? It's where you don't trust yourself enough to show up in the way that you can. And then the other side of it is your intuition. I can tell you in my business over the past 10 years, the moments that I've had massive failures slash feedback, because all it is feedback, is when I went against my business intuition. Right? I negated the intuition, the inner calling. No, you should do this. I'm like, and then I got convinced to do that, and then it just didn't work out in my favor. And then the third part of that whole internal positioning thing is just really understanding that there's laws of like being abundant, right? It's just people being scared to charge their worth. People being scared to say, oh, I'm scared to ask for money. I hate sales, and doing all these kind of things. That again, imposter syndrome. You gotta get that stuff squared away first, or at least put in some real work before you can do all these mechanics. And what I see that is pretty insidious is that people are like, well, maybe if I get another course and I learn this, then that will help me in my business. Or if I hire that coach and then they'll do that. These are just self-sabotaging behaviors in a lot of cases, because you're not putting yourself out there. Why? Because you have imposter syndrome. Why? Because I don't feel good enough. Why? Because I'm afraid of judgment. All of these things that show up, and we think it's another course that we need. And all that leads to is courseritis. You know what I mean? So I tell my clients, I'm like, let your credit card cool off and promise me you're not going to buy anything for 100 days. Because in these 100 days, we're going to be working on you, on yourself. What are your beliefs? What are the underlying reasons that you feel that you're stuck and that you're not getting ahead? It all has to do with the way that you see yourself. And so I've gone through it big time, where I reach a certain income level. I'm like, man, I can't get beyond that income level. I have an upper limit problem. So all of this is all part of that journey of getting into that place where you can become a profitable entrepreneur. Confidence and clarity, certainty, conviction, showing up at a different level. But it all starts with the internal stuff first.
So true. So true. You know, I think this is really where people have to sit back and go back to the drawing board and ask themselves, what do they really want for their business, and who do they really want to solve the problem for? Because that ideal custom avatar is always confusing, because they don't know, okay, is it 35 to 50? Is it 60 to 65? Is it the kids? Is it the teens? Is it the mothers? We don't know those things, but because we are testing every day, we'll end up finding those things. And sometimes when people think about their business, they don't know how to start. You know, so What are the best tips you can give someone who is building a business today and saying, okay, by this time next year, this is where I want to be, but before I get there, how do I reverse engineer that process? What kind of tips and strategies can they be able to apply starting today?
I'll tell you, one of the things that I wish I would have done sooner is, and I didn't understand this until maybe 5 years ago, is the importance of core values. I talk about it all the time now because I think it's so important. And I went through the core value exercise. I mean, I have one in my community, but you can find something online like how to discover your core values. You know, you can do it pretty simply. That is huge. I wish I would have done it sooner. And the reason I say that is because I didn't realize that my highest value is freedom. And we talked about it right at the beginning of the show. That's how I operate. Everything I do is like, it's got to honor my core values. You know what I mean? And I recognize, I'm like, that's why I was so miserable in corporate. That's why. Because I worked with great people. I was intellectually stimulated. I made, great money, but I was so miserable. And the reason is because it was brushing up against my core value of freedom. I don't like people telling me what to do. You know what I mean? And I did it for so long, and then I didn't even recognize that. So I'm like, oh shit, now I understand why I don't function in that way. Perfect. So when you operate with your core values, then opportunities that come to you, check in with yourself. Is this honoring my core value? I was in a business partnership that unfortunately failed. Why? Because of freedom. Like, there's just certain elements that I wish somebody would have told me that sooner, to say, listen, make sure you're honoring your core values. It's almost like your true north, your internal compass that is never going to steer you wrong. And when you operate with your core values, it's a game changer. And then again, if you're starting, okay, how do I reverse engineer this? Well, what do you want? Most of the time I work with my new clients or whatever, they're going to tell you everything about what they don't want, right? I'm struggling with this and I can't make this, or I'm really that. You're telling me everything of what you don't want, but what do you want? Because people somehow feel undeserving, or they don't stop to ask themselves, well, what is it that I want? What do I want? Or giving themselves permission to say, this is what I want, and boldly just own it, right? And then once we do all that foundational work, why is it that you want it? Because, the classic that people will tell you is like, I want to make $1 million. Everybody says that. I want to make $1 million in my business. Well, why do you want that? And it's like, well, because it'll prove that I'm a success. Why does that matter? Right? So you get into the real psychological reasons of why they want what they want. Maybe they recognize that it's not about the $1 million. Maybe it's you can have a really fantastic multiple six figures because you want more freedom, right? So for me, I am all about the less I work, the more I make. That's the mantra that goes on in my head all the time. Where can I create leverage or passive income and this and that? Why? Because freedom is my highest value. I want more time. I'm not a morning person, so I don't take any meetings before noon. So again, what do you want? What do you want from your business? Most people don't do that. And then it's a matter of going into the business framework and the mechanics and the funnels and all the other stuff and the targets, which anybody can do. You can find that information. But I feel like where most people don't take the time to really recognize is this first part of what I'm talking about. It's so essential.
Oof, this is great. This is so great. Thank you for this knowledge and information, because, now that someone has that idea on how to start their business and what to do, now that we hear, oh, we're in a recession, some people don't believe it, some people believe it, and it's like, I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's something that's going to change my life perspective, but in a tough economy, because you went through it in 2008, how does someone do it today, or even bulletproofing themselves for tomorrow with the least of uncertainties? How do they bulletproof their business so they don't feel like, oh, I don't have any clients, I don't have any income, how do I sustain my business? What are the things that they have to do to bootstrap that strategy?
That's a really, really, really great question because it's the reality of what's going on, I got invited into a group. It's like a business, it's like a think tank, mastermind and whatnot. And the thing that I thought was really interesting is I'm the small fish in that pond. There's people that are 8-figure, 9-figure earners. Really big. And part of me went into imposter syndrome. I'm like, damn, I shouldn't even be here. You know what I mean? These people are playing at a way different level. And I'm like, of course I deserve to be here. This is good. This will stretch me. So what was so fascinating about this, Trevor, is these people are excited about the economy. Isn't that interesting? They're excited about the downturn in the economy. So that just goes to show you that your perspective, your interpretation of the economy is just that. It's an interpretation. Because the people who have money are excited about it because they see it as a endless opportunity, right? So what if we embodied that same mindset of it being full of opportunity, where people are scared that's your time and your chance to lead? And before we hit the live button, I said, yeah, I feel like this fuel, like I'm getting out there, I'm putting myself out there. That's what you have to do. Show up, be the leader, because most people are starving to be led. So if you have the calling to do stuff and to grow your business, understand that that's coming through you. So you have a responsibility to put yourself out there. And so the limitations of what you create is only guarded by that, your limitations. Because I can tell you, the people that are super successful, they see it as endless opportunity. And so it is where your attention is. If your attention is on the lack, or oh my God, or I'm so scared, then you're just going to get more of that. If we really recognize the power of our thinking, the power of our thoughts, and that you are what you think about all day long, you're going to think some new thoughts or just be really very cognizant. My favorite quote in the whole world is stand guard at the doorway of your mind, right? So you want to be conditioning your mind on the daily with what is it that you want. Because notice, I go back to, most people will focus on what they don't want instead of recognizing that they can focus on what they do want. And then it's about the law of Goya. The law of Goya is get off your ass and do something. Put yourself out there, be talking about your message, have certainty, have conviction, because these are the people that people follow. So if you want to make a change and if you want to stand out, it's never been a better time, right? Regardless, create your own economy. That's what the opportunity is.
Spot on. This is spot on. I love that law of Goya, because people don't really get off their asses. They're just like, man, I'll just wait. Something will happen and I'll just figure it out. Shit. You know?
No, what's so fascinating is that whatever you want to believe in, creator of the universe, laws of the universe, whatever it is, but there's this like invisible law of momentum. Like when you get into action, things start opening up and you're almost like, dang, you know, I'm like, things are opening up and things are coming. And what is that thing that I'm saying to myself all day long? Like, people need what I have, and it's fascinating what happens when you get into action. It's like a universal law. It's just like if I take this pen and I drop it, it's a law of gravity, right? There's just laws that are indisputable. Where the law of action is that action begets action. It's just like, it's just action. Action, action, action. And the other side of it is like not adding any emotion to it, right? Because a lot of times we'll like be like, oh, what if I put this out there and it doesn't work? Stop it. Stop being attached to what you think is going to look like. Just put it out there and focus on what you want, because it's never going to show up the way you think it's going to show up. And if you release like this need to grasp on and be like, oh, I have to be in control. I used to be like that. But I was so in control of control that I was out of control. You know what I mean? And when I released it, and I was like, you know what? I know in good faith what I have to share is needed in the world. It's important. Here's who I want to attract. Here's why. And here's the reason. And I'm in integrity and I'm passionate about what I do. And I know that I can help people. Well, damn, like things just start opening up for you. So many people rob themselves of like really showing up in that way. And putting themselves out there and just saying, you know what, this is what I want. I got my eye on the vision. So many of these like TikTokers that I see, a couple of them come to mind. There's this guy, Keith Lee. I don't know if you've seen him on TikTok. I admire him so much. He's unbelievable. He's in Las Vegas. And he's a TikTok, it's Keith Lee. And what he does is, he's like, I just want to do TikToks. I want to support my family. I want to be an influencer. But what I want to do is save businesses that are struggling in Las Vegas by me going, buying food, and then I'll give you an honest review. But I'm going to be honest, right? So he has literally, I think he has like 7 million followers now, and he literally goes into a restaurant and completely changes their outcome. And it all started with him having a vision, like a really clear vision of what he wanted to do and why he wanted to do it. And you're just holding on to that and with such conviction that it's happening for him. He's so inspiring to me. And the other dude that's just as inspiring that on TikTok and YouTube, his name is Vic Blends. So same deal, struggling. He's like a barber of all things. He's a barber. So he hangs out in the streets and he's like, can I bless you with a haircut? Can I bless you with a free haircut? You've seen him. I don't know if you've seen him.
Yeah.
So then he's so cool. He gets people in his chair and he's like doing like, he's coaching them and talking about life and being inspirational. And now his channel has millions and millions of followers. So that just goes to show you, these are ways that they're positioning their brand to profit. Why? Because they're leading, they're holding a vision, and they're putting themselves out there. And I have mad respect for that, because you can do it too. Just see it as something like, if they can, so can I. And there's something really empowering when you take a look at it from that perspective.
Thank you so much for that. I was looking at those two accounts, and I'm definitely going to be checking them out for sure, because TikTok is definitely a place where you find a lot of things you're like, whoa, where did this come from?
Unbelievable. And you can do it on any platform, right? Like on YouTube or whatever. It's just putting yourself out there and like, why I admire them so much is because they held the vision and like, this is what I want to do, you know? Because yes, you're gonna get haters, you're gonna get people like, you're gonna do what? Because if you think about it, in both of their cases, and the reason why I like their stories is like Keith Lee, like, what? You're reviewing food, but look at what's happened. And then in Big Blends, like, you're a barber. Like, if you people are like, you're just a barber. No, you're not. You're storytelling. You're creating impact. I think it's so beautiful. I am very inspired by both of those stories.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will definitely check them out, and thank you for highlighting that as well. It just puts the whole episode into reality and puts you in check, knowing that this is exactly what you need to do. So I really appreciate you for being here, Patty Dominguez, for just spending time with us today and learning from you on how you can be able to brand and position yourself in the industry where there's so much saturation and so much content out there. But you can definitely be one of the very few who can come out and stand out looking outstanding for the community you want to serve. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Yeah. And if anyone's interested in finding how you're positioning, so is it okay if I share? Is that okay? If
Go ahead. You beat me to it.
Oh, okay. I don't want to sue. I want to be really respectful because this is your channel. So thank you for that. So basically, you can go to positioningquiz.com, and you could take the quiz and see. And I talk about those three things: internal positioning, external, and activation. And then I'm a giver. Like, I love giving and I love serving. So in my email list, you'll get lots of like mini courses, and check out this podcast. This is what I talk about here, and it's going to help you to build your business so that you can stand out and create your category of one. And my general website, you could just go to positioningexpert.com and it'll take you right to my website.
Thank you so much for that. And for those who are looking for it too, you already know you can find it in the show notes, in the description. So you just tap on the link and you can be able to find it there. So I appreciate you, and I'll definitely look forward to having you back in our next season for sure.
Oh, it's my honor. Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate you.
Anytime.